All right. We're starting here we're picking up with initiative versus guilt. Erickson psychosocial stages. Initiative versus guilt. And now for your age range, we've got the fourth and fifth year. Fourth and fifth year. And the big psychosocial question during this stage of development is, am I good or am I bad? Am I a good kid or am I a bad kid? Okay. This is really interesting because this is morality, right? They're little kids thinking about the idea of morality. Am I a good kid or a bad kid? Um, and, if you've studied the development of morality in other classes before and are familiar with that theory, you know that little kids really base what they base their answer on what really informs them about this. What is really powerful at that age is punishment. Okay. And so it's really interesting because Adler was one of the people who really got parents thinking about this idea and starting to do things a little differently. So you might have grown up and had your parents punish you for bad behavior, but sit you down, and tell you, we still love you. You're a good kid, but we expect a lot more from you. We know you can do better. And emphasizing the fact that you're still a good kid, that they still love you. And this is a really crucial stage of development during these fourth and fifth years. Coming to the conclusion on whether you are a good or a bad person tends to stick with you throughout the rest of your life. And if you feel that you're a good person, you're going to have the confidence to take initiative in life. But if not, you're always going to kind of be drowned in guilt and stunted with guilt. Okay, so very important stage. Then we've got industry versus inferiority. Okay, and what I want you to remember here for your age range is just 6 through puberty. We'll say 6 through puberty. Now think back to initiative versus guilt. Kids are getting that feeling mostly from their parents. But industry versus inferiority is going to be different. Now, the big psychosocial question is, am I competent or am I worthless? Am I competent or am I worthless? Who do you think kids are going to turn to the most for this? Okay. You might be thinking, well, at that age, right, they're going to school. They're usually going to school, and that is true. And they tend to look at their peers. In other words, the peers are what they need to feel they measure up to, right? And if they feel that they're pretty much measuring up to their peers, then they get the sense of, being worthy, being competent. Okay? And if they don't, they get a sense of being worthless. So another very important stage in the development of your social self, who you are, how you portray and feel yourself to be around other people. Then we get to identity. Oh, and if if a kid feels that they are measuring up to their peers, they also are going to have they're going to produce a lot in life. They're going to be industrious. They're going to have a sense of industry that they can do things, right? They can get things done. They can rely on themselves. They're going to have a sense of industry in their personality. But if not, they could end up with an inferiority complex for the rest of their life or for a lot longer than what is normal. Okay. Then we get to identity versus confusion. Okay. And for your age range, I just want you to remember adolescence. Okay. Identity versus confusion. And the big psychosocial question here, okay, is, who am I? Where am I going in life? If you think about it, those are very abstract things, right? Who am I? Where am I going in life? So there's a shift now to abstract thinking. And if you studied like Piaget's development of cognitive processes, you know that, yes, these guys really are lined up in their theories, because that's what age kids start to master this thinking about abstract things. Hey, who am I? Where am I going in life? So this is all related to identity. And by the time that someone leaves adolescence, if they have pretty much figured out who they are and the basic direction they're going in life, okay, they're going to end up carrying that stable sense of identity with them throughout the remainder of their life. But if not, they could end up in identity confusion for a long time. Sometimes for the entire rest of their life, it's never resolved. Okay? In fact, who was in that stage for much longer than normal himself, who we've studied so far? Yeah, that's Erikson, as he was wandering around trying to find himself, right? Now we've got intimacy versus isolation. And you should find this one interesting because most of you are in this age range. And the range I want you to remember is simply early adulthood. Early adulthood. Okay. And the big psychosocial question during this period is, am I capable of meaningful relationships? Am I capable of meaningful relationships with others? Or must I live in isolation? Now, I want you to think about this. This is really interesting. Certainly, thinking about love relationships is very important in this period of time, in this idea of, can I fall in love? Am I lovable? Can someone else love me? Can I love somebody else, right? And those things are really important to develop. But it's not just limited to, romantic kind of love, okay? So are you capable of developing an intimate relationship with somebody else, really sharing personal things with another person and becoming very close where your lives are intertwined, okay? Or are you not, do you find that you're not capable of that and you're pretty much going to live out the rest of your life in isolation? And another really interesting thing to think about is, do you think that somebody who is married and is in a stable marriage and maybe has 4 kids could still live in isolation? And yes, it's true. So we're talking here not about physical isolation necessarily. We're talking about psychological isolation. Just like somebody could be single but have some very close friends, and not be living in psychological isolation at all. So intimacy versus isolation. Okay. Now this next one, generativity versus self-absorption. We could talk about this all day, and I couldn't tell you all the interesting things coming with this in this stage of development in your life. This one, I just want you to remember for the age range, middle age, okay? But some really interesting things happen in middle age, okay? So the big psychosocial question in middle age is, am I producing anything of worth? Am I producing anything of worth in my life? Okay. Now, I want you to stop and think about this age range for a period of time here. A lot of you who have parents, for instance, who are in this age range. And you might be aware, for instance, you might have parents that are dealing with elderly parents themselves. So they might have lost a parent. They might be taking care of a parent who is going downhill. They probably have even lost a friend in their life by now. So the idea of death is becoming very much a reality, much more so than at earlier ages. So no matter how much you think about death or how real it seems to you when you're younger, and we all vary on that, okay? But no matter how much, it's going to be far more magnified in middle age, okay? So people are faced with this idea of, we're going to die. We're all just going to die. And it really makes you think, am I producing anything of worth in my life? Is my life really, my life is going to be such a small window of time, such an insignificant little window of time. But is it going to be meaningful in the long run? Am I actually going to leave something, leave an effect or something that's going to have an effect on future generations? Okay, that's what this question is about. Am I producing anything of worth, of value in my life? Am I producing something of value? What's interesting is we'll see people at this age range sometimes choose a very different career. They might have chosen their career and gone into it when they were younger based on something like money, but now realize that this is not giving them a sense of generativity, that they're really producing something of value that gives them a sense of their life being worthwhile. And something that is going to pass on and make a difference in future generations. And so not unusual for somebody to feel that the answer is no, but to do something about it, right? And they could go into volunteer work, or they could actually find another job, a different job. Sometimes people even go back and get an education all over again in a different field in this age range to get that feeling. But people can get that feeling from more than their work. Okay, you certainly can get it from your work, and that's one of the reasons why I love my job and teaching, because it really does give me a sense of generativity. But there are other ways that people can get a sense of generativity. For instance, they might feel like they're producing works of art that will really affect the future generation, really get the future generation thinking. Writing books, for instance, that will affect future generations, producing other kinds of pieces of art. Or, they might be people who have decided to become super involved in their grandkids' lives, their kids' lives and their grandkids' lives, and use their energy to really help them out and make a difference in future generations through that. So there are different ways of getting this feeling. But notice something else really interesting here. In a healthy individual, when you reach middle age, there is a more outward focus, of concern. And, you might be thinking, what, people are selfish up till then? They're more self-absorbed up till then? Yeah, they are, but that's perfectly normal. It's necessary in development. I mean, think about it. You have to gain an education. You've got some really important things to worry about with yourself. You need to gain an education, get all that under your belt. You need to get established in a career. Some of you are going to be interested in starting families. And so until middle-aged, that is very normal and very functional to have more of a self-absorption. But in healthy people, middle age, there's much more outward focus, unless the answer to this question is no and remains that way. Because otherwise, what you're left with is being self-absorbed, for the rest of your life, being more self-absorbed. This last stage is also a really interesting stage, integrity versus despair. Just want you to think of the age range here as older adulthood. Integrity versus despair, okay? And the big question here at the end of life is, have I lived a full life? Now, they're not talking about, did I do everything that was on my bucket list? They're not talking about anything like that. But what they're talking about is, do you look back on your life at this time and feel, wow, I've lived a really full and interesting and rewarding life? Or do you mostly hold regrets? Okay. This reminds me of when my wonderful granny died. and she knew she was dying. She called us each to her for a day. And when I went to spend my day with her, it was really hard because I really loved her. Had some wonderful memories of my granny, and I knew I was going to miss her terribly. And this is what she wanted to talk about, was her impending death. And but, it ended up being such a gift because she told me, she said, I do not want you to grieve when I die. I said, you're nuts. Of course I'm going to grieve. I am going to miss you every day for the rest of my life. And she said, no, 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 you don't understand. I don't want you to grieve for me. She says, I'm ready. I've lived a really full life and I'm ready to go now. And, I did remember that, and it was really helpful. And like I said, very much a gift. So she faced her death with integrity. Okay, but it could have been very different. She could have been, ending her life with mostly regrets, with a lot of regrets. Okay, and facing her death with despair because of that. Erikson's psychosocial stages as opposed to Freud's psychosexual stages. So Erikson's psychosocial stages and how we develop our social self, our sense of self, how we interact with other people, and even our social skills all kind of tied up in here.